What is up, everybody? Happy Saturday morning. Welcome to the College Football Show here on Roto Grinders, leading you up close to lineup lock on a Saturday morning. Fun slate of college football action for us this weekend. Justin Van Zuiden, that's me. John Laub alongside as usual. And I think we've got a really fun slate here today. Some good stuff to break down. Of course, we got through the first full week of games last week. Had some, interesting takeaways from week one. Ollie Gordon continues to cement his status as the best college fantasy football player on the planet. We had games all throughout the weekend last week. So fun end of the week with LSU and USC. Florida State continues to look terrible. Clearly the big disappointment of the first couple of weeks of the season. But John, what is stuck in your head so far?
One, that I can't fade Ollie Gordon any longer in the cash games, at least for the foreseeable future. And we've been here before with running backs like this, right? I'm old enough and remember Melvin Gordon was an automatic smash when he was at Wisconsin. And there's just players pop up like this. So I agree with Ollie Gordon. Personally, I think Michigan's offense is as irrelevant fantasy-wise as you can possibly get. They look terrible on offense. The quarterback position is going to be a struggle all year long. I think we have 12 games on the main slate right today. So this is exciting. And we don't have as many FCS options. I'm pretty excited that we're more into, a higher level of competition, which will make the variance, I think, a little bit better. Because last week we had quarterbacks thrown for 5 or 6 touchdowns against, FCS opponents.
Yeah, not a lot of clunkers on the slate. We do have a couple of MAC teams. I threw shade on the MAC last week, but NIU's on the main slate today. I can't throw too much shade because my alma mater is on the slate, but they are in one of the blowout likely games. Though if that's not a blowout, I'll be happy. But we've got Bowling Green and NIU are the two MAC schools that probably going to get a little bit of a whooping here on the main slate, but otherwise pretty competitive for a week of non-conference games. Arkansas and Oklahoma State should be a good one. Texas and Michigan, maybe a better real life game than fantasy game, but should still be a fun game to watch nonetheless. Georgia Tech and Syracuse, a game that could have some fireworks this afternoon as well. So pretty solid day of games all told for it being still non-conference matchups and, DraftKings only using the afternoon games on their main slate. Not a ton in terms of this main slate of injury news to look for. Taj Brooks is a big one if you're playing the night slate tonight. But in terms of the main slate, there isn't a whole lot that we are still waiting on. Andrew Armstrong, one of the starting wide receivers for Arkansas, could potentially be one. But nobody that's necessarily slate breaking one way or the other. Is there anything you're keeping an eye on as far as news and updates to watch for today?
I got up at 7. I started combing some Discords. I didn't see any big injuries that I'm aware of. So I think we're pretty clear runway right now. We always get once in a while that last minute, 11 o'clock, he's not on the field, not suiting up. But I feel pretty good that everyone's healthy who I'm interested in playing right now.
Yeah, so hopefully that makes it a pretty straightforward day for lineup building. But if anything does come across the wires, we will make sure to let you know. Appreciate all of you getting up early, having your coffee, having your breakfast, watching college football talk with us. And looks like 113 of you watching now on the YouTube. Make sure you hit that thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, all that fun stuff that helps us beat those YouTube algorithms. Certainly appreciate those of you watching live. We'll dig into your questions later in the show. If you're new, the best way to get access to us and ask questions during the show is in our Discord channel. And that you do not have to be a Roto Grinders premium subscriber. You just have to be a Roto Grinders member. So you can get in for free, rotogrinders.com/Discord. And we'll be hanging out in the live stream chat channel. We can pass along any questions that you might have throughout the show. All right, let's dig into quarterback here on the DraftKings slate. And again, we'll go position by position. We'll go quarterback, running back, wide receiver, go through the DraftKings slate, recap that a little bit with John's fantastic 4 plays, and then we'll talk a little FanDuel, which the FanDuel main slate includes the night games. So if you're playing over there, we can maybe touch on those night games a little bit as well. But let's start on DraftKings at quarterback. The top priced options today, Quinn Ewers for Texas in that game against Michigan. Kind of surprising to see him all the way up at the top, but how good the pricing and matchups at this point. Cameron Rising, Riley Leonard, Drew Aller, Alan Bowman, Kyle McCord, Haynes King. Pretty good set of options above 8K today on DraftKings. Who are you looking at potentially starting as your QB1, or are you looking to go cheaper today?
I am looking to go cheaper, but I did make one lineup because I was a little surprised at this ownership. Right now, we have them projected at less than 10%, at 8%. That's Cameron Rising of Utah. I mean, I really like him today. We just saw he threw 5 touchdowns last week, right? It was against Southern Utah, granted, but they're at home against Baylor today. And Baylor is a much better football team. So even though the Utes are a nice favorite, the game should remain relatively close. And, Justin, we've seen this over the last couple of years. I think Cameron Rising's in his 6th year of college football. Last year, Michael Penix, Bo Nix. We have Alan Bowman in his 7th year of football with the Cowboys. You have these older players, basically young men, playing college football, and they can really rip up these lesser opponents. I like Cameron Rising. He's really easy to stack. We could talk about that later. But I think Cameron Rising at less than 10% is being overlooked if you want to go that way.
Yeah, I like him. He's my favorite option at the top today. You look at what that offense did last week. It was basically a touchdown on every drive in the first half while the first team offense was out there, and step up in competition today, of course, but it should be competitive, and they are still projected to score about 35 points. So Cameron Rising, definitely my favorite spend up option. Riley Leonard is projected for around the same number of fantasy points, but with that game having a 4 touchdown spread, I'd just rather pay an extra 300 to get to Cam Rising. Don't love a whole lot of the other top end options, though I think the intriguing one down towards the bottom end of the range is Haynes King. Yes. Definitely another guy that's got plenty of experience at the college level. Not sold on the Syracuse defense. We'll see how they play today, but that game has a 62-point total and is basically a pick 'em. So both teams projected for around 30 points. We saw Georgia Tech beat Florida State. They've had an extra week, I think, to prepare. I don't think they played last week. I got to double check that though, because I know they weren't on the main slate. They did. They played Georgia State. So basically they had a cupcake opponent last week. They won 35-12. And so, they've had a little extra time to get healthy and get from that overseas trip and get ready for this one today. So I like Haynes King at 8,100. He's really the only other option I like above 8K. And then we get down into the 7s, I think, and that's where people are going to start looking for their options, maybe even play a super flex and their one QB1 choice from this range. So what are you looking at in the middle tier of quarterbacks?
I'm going to save my favorite option for the Fantastic Four later. I do think a really interesting pivot is Avery Johnson of Kansas State. I really like him in GPPs because I do think we're going to talk about DJ Giddens later for when we look at running backs. If you want to be different and build a different lineup, Avery Johnson is a dual threat playmaker, and he is very interesting. Our ownership projections right now have him at about 18%. Giddens is going to be much higher. If you do want to differentiate, I have no problem with Avery Johnson. Now, there's a little bit, you have to have watched him. We saw him in the bowl game last year, and he really impressed us. But last week, he played Tennessee Martin. He only scored 16 fantasy points. So you don't really get a complete picture of Avery Johnson. he can get 3 rushing touchdowns. Now, that's his ceiling, but that's how you're going to break the bank for a GPP. And if you want to have, differentiation, what if DJ Giddens only scores 1, Avery Johnson gets you 3 rushing, 1 or 2 passing? So I love Avery Johnson in GPP. He's nice in cash if you want to get a little bit lower ownership, but I really like Avery Johnson in this game.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way to look at that game, given how the ownership is going to flow towards Giddens. The price tag is pretty manageable. They're projected for about 30 points as well. So he's an option at 7,500. Have a hunch the guy that we're going to talk about later at Taylor Green is going to be the best play of that group. We can talk about him more when we get there, but I think he's going to be an option that a lot of people look to today. And then there's also some options on the cheap. We saw it with the Maryland passing attack has put up decent numbers in recent years. Michigan State looked horrible in their first game. So, it's what's a little bit strange to me. I mean, it's the way that they put these teams pitting up against each other in like week 2. I don't know. Seems a little bit weird schedule wise, but Maryland coming off a big win last week against your UConn Huskies. I think they'll have to take to the air a little bit more today. I mean, it's not like Michigan State is a complete patsy, but Maryland projected for 26 points. I think Edwards at 6,500 makes sense. And we all like the Pitt value last week. I don't think DraftKings has priced those guys up enough. Eli Holstein at 6,500 still seems a little bit too cheap. So if you're looking for a cheap QB2, who you like?
I do love Eli Holstein. He's in 2 of my 3 cash game lineups. He's the Pitt quarterback. And we didn't even know if he was going to get the job, Justin. I think he was named like a couple days before the season or within the last week before kickoff. And I have to admit, I did not expect him to smash the slate last week. He looked great. They had 80 plays. I can't believe that a Pat Narduzzi offense ran 80 plays. And if you know Narduzzi, everyone, he was a slog and pound, but he's brought in a new offensive coordinator. He's allowed that offense coordinator to call plays, and they picked it up. I mean, 80 plays, right? Justin, isn't that what we're looking for, right? I mean, if you give me 75 plays again, I'll take that from a starting quarterback any day. And I do like Edwards, but I have to be a little careful. It was against UConn. So I saw the first half of the game, then I couldn't take it anymore, my friend. I just turned it off. But Edwards is interesting, and it should be a tighter matchup. Even though Michigan State looked terrible, they should be closer. It's a Big Ten contest. And I agree with you, Justin. I'm shocked that this Big Ten game is on the slate so early in the season, but it must have been something weird with the schedule that I don't understand. But I do like Edwards, but I prefer Holstein of Pittsburgh.
Can you hear me okay? My camera went defunct on me, so I reconnected so that my face would show up again. All right. All of a sudden, my whole screen went black for a second. I'm like, oh, now nobody can see me. So we're back. All right. But I was able to hear everything that you mentioned there. And I have seen somebody talking in the Discord as well. Bake Money 125. Is it viable to overstack Pitt and Cincy today for large field GPPs? Somebody in the YouTube commenting about Pittsburgh as well. And I mean, you mentioned the 80 plays. And another factor is we're operating with different rules these days in college football. No longer are they stopping the clock after every first down. In theory, right, these last couple of years, there should be less plays per game. And overall, obviously there are, but Pitt, certainly a team that's playing faster than what we've seen in the past. And there's a reason that game has a 60 some odd point total. So I like Holstein today. I think you're totally fine if you're getting exposure to Pitt. And he's certainly a rock solid super flex option in any DFS game format. So, I mean, other options at quarterback, I'm looking at who else we might have some ownership on. Sorsby on the other side of that game, obviously, but he's a little more expensive.
I was going to mention I like Sorsby a lot this week, but he is expensive. So you have to work the running back value, wide receiver value. But him and Eli are an interesting stack if you're really going for GPP.
All right. Anything else at the quarterback position before we move on to running backs?
Nope, not that I like.
All right. Just a couple reminders here, and then we'll move along. But we do have an interesting new partnership with Splash Sports. So you can skip the trip to Vegas. Splash Sports will host NFL Survivor and Pick'em pools every week, available in 34 states plus Canada. So you can start with their $1 million Survivor pool in week number 1. Pick one winning team each week for a chance at $1 million. But remember to not use the same team twice. Join us in a week 2 Roto Grinders Survivor Revival Tournament. That is a tough couple of words to say together. Survivor Revival Tournament. There we go. $20 entry fee for that. Over $20,000 to be won. Plus Roto Grinders premium prizes for anybody that finishes in the top 20. So you can get the links in our description for more details. And also, if you're looking for a plus expected value contest this NFL season, our friends over at Action Network have one for you. Their podcast called The Favorites is bringing back their free NFL Pick'em contest this season. Totally free to sign up. Favorites.actionnetwork.com. Pick 5 games against the spread each week. Cash prizes available for the top 10 finishers. $40,000 the first place. $100,000 total prize pool. Thousands up for grabs each week. And again, that is totally free to play. The contest just went live. Favorites.actionnetwork.com. You can sign up and compete for that $100,000 prize pool. All right, let's go ahead and move our attention to running back here today, where Ollie Gordon reminded us last week, think of reasons not to play him, but he's still Ollie Gordon, and 104 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, receiving touchdown, 4 catches, 40 PPR points last week. In a game against an FCS school, but a good FCS school. And now today they face Arkansas in what should be a competitive, high-scoring game. I mean, do we need to prioritize Ollie Gordon today? I'm sure is a question a lot of people are asking.
I have him in all 3 of my cash game lineups. It is interesting. I put one cash game lineup where I put Ollie Gordon in the super flex. So I think that's an interesting strategy. If you want to pivot off the 2 quarterbacks, and I'm an 85%, 90% 2 quarterback guy, but there is a good argument to be made that Ollie Gordon super flex, but I don't think in cash games you can get off him. Hey, if he's at 75% ownership, it is what it is. He'll beat the other 25%. I think the other question is GPP. Can you pivot off of Ollie Gordon in GPP? I think you can, and you can stack this game with other options if you really want to differentiate. But to me, that's where the big question is. Can I get a GPP? Can I win it if I bypass Ollie Gordon?
Yeah, which it depends on the numbers the other running backs put up as well. If everybody else is struggling, then Ollie Gordon's, 40 points or 30 points or whatever it is are certainly going to be a lot more valuable if nobody else gets above, say, 25. And I think the other consideration is I don't really like a lot of the other names at the top, right? Jay Knott is 9,100. Who knows if he's fully healthy? They're only projected for 20 points. Donovan Edwards and Mullings for Michigan. Like, I'm not touching that offense with a 10-foot pole when both of those guys are priced that high. Like, really, if you're spending above 7,400 on a running back, you just get Gordon. Otherwise, you're going with the cheaper guys, right? I mean, none of these other top end options even make any sense to me.
I couldn't agree more. I was absolutely blown away, Justin, when I first saw the slate. I'm like, Jaden Ott is 9.1 against Auburn. I mean, I guess if you want to throw in a complete contrarian GPP lineup, I guess you could do Auburn Cal, but I'm not that ballsy to do that. And I don't understand how you could go with these 2 Michigan running backs. I watched every play of Michigan. I then rewatched some highlights. Donovan Edwards is the most overpriced player on the slate. Mullins, if you don't know everyone, he's a true freshman. So there's definitely risk there, even though I do think he looked better running the football last week than Edwards. But I'm not touching the 2 Michigan backs.
I'm not either. So yeah, that takes us down to around 7K for your next options. Either A, if you're not rostering Gordon, or B, for somebody to pair with Gordon. So LaQuint Allen was the play du jour last week. I've got to tell this story because I thought it was interesting. I mentioned it briefly on one of the baseball shows this week, but doesn't get as much appreciation there, obviously, with this being the college football show. I had over 95.5 rushing yards for LaQuint Allen last week. I bet that. And he was at 95. The game was out of hand. I closed things out. I looked later. I had more money than I thought I would. I'm like, what in the world did I win that I didn't think I won? And LaQuint Allen, over 95.5 rushing yards, is graded as a winner. And it says 98 rushing yards. I'm thinking, oh, there must have been a stat correction. He got 3 extra yards. That's awesome. No, he didn't. What Syracuse did, ahead by 16 points with 5 seconds left, they handed the ball to LaQuint Allen on the last play of the game, and he got 3 yards, which is great for me. But what in the world are you doing giving him the ball up 16 with 5 seconds left? Just take a knee and the game is over, which makes me think that somebody involved with the Syracuse staff had a bet on his own player. I don't know. I'm not accusing anybody of fraud, but I couldn't believe it. I've had my share of bad beats, and I can give you stories of those to the moon. But of wins that I didn't expect, that one's got to be right up there. Like why they gave him the ball with 5 seconds left, I have no idea. But thank you to whoever made that
That's crazy.
decision.
Just from a football standpoint,
right.
That's absolutely madness. What if he hurt himself
right.
like Jordan Love last night? Like, oh my God.
I couldn't believe it. But anyway, 3 extra yards. If that helped anybody cash by 0.3 of a point in DFS last week, you can thank them as well. But so he's there at 7K. You've got Haynes on the other side of that game for Georgia Tech at 6,900. Jaden Blue at 6,800. Singleton for Penn State's coming off a solid performance last week against West Virginia. We've already kind of hinted at Giddens. Like, this mid-tier is loaded with strong options. So who do you like in here?
I'm going to, again, I'll keep one for our Fantastic Four later in the show. I like Jamal Haynes a lot. You had mentioned it. Syracuse got smacked last week. I think they gave up over 200 yards rushing to a G5 program, Ohio. They're going to run the ball. You have a quarterback who can run. You have Jamal Haynes, the running back, who can run. So I do like Jamal Haynes, but we have a pretty high ownership projected at around 28%. So I understand that. I'll tell you a player who I was really impressed with, Justin. I don't think he's getting enough discussion. And I wonder if in the new offensive scheme change that he's being overlooked early in this season. And there is risk here. But I thought Nate Singleton, Justin, I went back and saw all his carries. He looked really good, everyone. He had 13 carries for 114 yards. This is against West Virginia. He did not have a cupcake matchup on the road. So I was impressed. We saw a lot of, FCS opponents playing Power 4. Singleton did it against a legitimate Power 4 program. He had 1 reception for 13 yards, and he scored a touchdown. It turned out to be 22.7 DK points. There is risk here because they're playing Bowling Green. But they're probably going to keep the starters in for at least a half. If Penn State puts up 35 points, Singleton's going to be a major contributor to that, and he's getting overlooked. And I've been very impressed early on. And not many people are talking about how good he's looked.
Yeah, I was impressed. I didn't have the highest of hopes for them compared to their preseason expectations.
Yep.
I bet West Virginia last week. Like, that was a miss. Penn State looked great. And I think he's a great option as well. So I've got a sneeze coming on, so I'm going to mute myself, and I'll let you move further down the running back board. Who else are you looking at today?
Sure. I do think that Jarquez Hunter of Auburn is very interesting player. We have him at less than 15%. He's 6.5. What I like about Hunter, he's clearly the lead back for the Auburn Tigers in the system. Now, last week, their quarterback, Peyton Thorne, threw 4 touchdowns. I don't think Peyton Thorne in general is a 4-touchdown guy. So I do, and there have been matchups in the past, if you watch Auburn, that you can get out of Hunter, you can get very good 20, 25-point games out of them. Cal, while they are a G4 program, they're new in the ACC. I don't think they're terrific on defense. And I was reading, Justin, they run this weird 2 down lineman, 4 linebacker, 5 defensive backs. Well, what does that tell me? If they line that up against an SEC opponent, Justin, I think the Tigers are going to run all over Cal today. I do like just Jarquez Hunter. He has 3 touchdown upside if the Tigers decide to exploit that Golden Bears run defense. So I like him. He's very interesting. Now, there's a floor that's a problem, right? If you have Peyton Thorne goes crazy. But I just don't think he does it 2 weeks in a row. I do like Jarquez Hunter.
Yeah, I like him a lot as well. Thanks for covering for my sneeze. I got muted just in time. Also got the got a text. Some know, some don't, but our oldest son is doing cross country running, and he just got involved in running this past spring. So he's only been running for about 8 months. And so he had no training at first. Like his track times were below average for his age and stuff. So, but he had his first cross country meet last Tuesday. And so it's a 3-mile race, and his 3-mile time was 22:07 last week. He wasn't happy with it. And so he just finished running this morning while we were on air. It was about 2 hours away, so I didn't go. He improved his time from 22:07 to 21:11. So 56 seconds of improvement there in about a week. So he's seems pretty excited anyway.
Great.
Yeah. So I will occasionally, this is my segue, be missing a few shows this year because obviously want to support my kids in their athletics. And so when he's got meets around home on Saturday mornings, we're going to try to go to those. So I will miss a few shows. Jordan Vanek will probably fill in for me a couple of weeks here and there throughout the fall. I actually think next week is one of those. So that I can go see the cross country is a weird sport for it to be a spectator sport, but it's always cool to see them crossing the finish line and then having way too much gas left in the tank compared to what I would have after running 3 miles. But that's why I'm here in a chair and talking football instead of running. We all have our talents. All right, let's go down to the bottom end of the running back board. I mean, you can absolutely live in that mid-range today. Probably not a slate where you want to get cute. I think that Desmond Reed is probably the obvious, kind of lower end play. Katron Allen, if you want to bank on Penn State getting everybody involved. I don't know if you want to touch the Baylor backfield today, but Reed is clearly the guy, one of the big winners from last week. Anything else you want to touch on at running back?
The only player who might be interesting, but it's a GPP move only. Raheem Sanders looked much better last week, the South Carolina running back. And he was terrible last year for Arkansas. He transferred to South Carolina. If you go back to the film or you look at his box scores from 2022, he was very good. I felt like he looked a lot better. You could take, if you really want to differentiate, I am interested in GPP on Raheem Sanders. He could give you a nice little option with very low ownership. And let me see, what did he do last week? He had 16.8 points. And I think this is a nice matchup against, in the passing game, he can receive. He was a wide receiver in high school, and he had receptions for Arkansas. If the game script gets away, I expect Sanders to remain on the field.
Yeah, I like him a good bit as well. I think, comparatively speaking, I can't remember where he's at on FanDuel off the top of my head. We'll get there in a bit. But 24 carries, cheap price, low ownership, like you mentioned. He's an interesting option at that salary. Probably not going any lower than that myself today at running back. Would prefer to take a shot on wide receiver if you're going cheap. All right. Speaking of, let's go ahead and pivot to wide receiver. Not a ton of high-priced, high-end options on DraftKings today. I think your wide receiver selections might look a little bit different if you're playing on FanDuel. Brennan Presley at $7K is your most expensive wide receiver. Part of what helps get Ollie Gordon into those lineups today is that there's not a lot of high-end spend at the wide receiver position. A lot of guys priced between 6K and 6,700. Who are you liking as your first wide receiver targets?
My first, when I processed the slate, I did say I'm going to stay off the high-end wide receivers. Isn't it interesting? No Oregon, no Ohio State, no Alabama here, right? And for so many years, you usually get one real high-end. We don't have anyone who even, 7K is the highest. We usually have one or two players over 8.5, right? So it is an interesting slate. I like Presley, but he's a PPR monster. I don't think there's a lot of touchdown upside with Ollie Gordon, so I don't like that. I'm not touching Isaiah Bond against Michigan. If he gets in that matchup with, is it Johnson or Jackson? I forget the Michigan cornerback now. If he gets that one-on-one matchup, Bond could be wiped out in that game. I don't like that. And there's no way I'm taking a Michigan tight end. I mean, there's just, what's the upside? I can't believe that. Loveland is the number 3 wide receiver, Colston Loveland. That's just mind-blowing to me. So I'm staying out of there. The only guy I might consider Xavier Henderson of Cincinnati. You could go with him if you want to stack that game.
Yeah, I think he's a fine play if you're looking to stack up pieces of that game, Henderson. We've got him projected as the second highest raw point scorer, I believe. Yeah, at the position. So Presley and Henderson, those are really my only 2 targets on the top end today at 6,500 and 7K. And then I'm kind of living in the 6K or the 5K options. Lots of guys in here. The Oklahoma State passing game we talk about, all 3 of their guys are going to get some ownership today. Obviously, Presley is the primary target, but Owens, Stribling, they're both in the kind of $4,800 to $5,500 range. There's just so many options in here that you could consider. Singleton for Georgia Tech, particularly if you're playing some Haynes King. Felton for Maryland is one of my favorite targets in this range as well today, coming off a solid performance. But what are you looking at here as we get into the 5Ks?
The only wide receiver that I like above 6, and I just want to mention him briefly because of a stacking option. Brent Keithy, the tight end with Cameron Rising. I mean, he's 6.3, so maybe people are shying away from him. But if you're going to stack anyone with Cameron Rising, I love Brent Keithy. He was injured all of last year. He came back with a 28.9 point day with 3 touchdowns last week. I love him. But then we go after that. There is so much goodness here. Couple questions I think you have to ask yourself. I believe that Eric Singleton was the best receiver on Georgia Tech at the beginning of the season. Early in the year, Rutherford has been the best receiver for Georgia Tech. And you do get a little bit of savings with Malik Rutherford at wide receiver. I like both of those options. It seems like, what do we have for projections? Who do we have? We have 6% at Rutherford and less. Right now, I have less than 1% with Singleton. If you hit the guy, I tend to think Singleton's due for a big day. I still think he's a very good player, so I like Singleton a little bit as a sneaky, especially in GPP, because I think people are going towards Rutherford in cash game lineups. Now, we had mentioned Brian Edwards, the quarterback at Maryland earlier. How about Ty Felton, the wide receiver? I mean, we do have him at high ownership at 30%, so I think he's a cash game only. But, man, is he a home run hitter. There was a lot of, if you were on the Maryland message boards, if you were looking for Maryland news in the summer, they started talking about Felton a lot. I did not expect him to go out and hammer UConn for 41 points. I don't expect him to get 41 points again, but I do like Ty Felton, and his price is only $5,400.
Yeah, I really like him today. I think he's probably one of my favorites. Got some exposure to Dane Key as well for Kentucky. Not the highest total game, obviously, there, but at least we know where the touches are going to go. And then as we start to go down cheap, again, we've talked about the quarterback, the running back. Now the wide receiver for Pitt would be Mumfield, probably their number one. DraftKings did not price up Aronde Gadsden enough, the tight end for Syracuse, after I think he got 12 targets last week, 11 or 12.
He looked good.
He did. And I mean, he was way too cheap last week at 3,500. Probably still too cheap at 5K, and Pena as well at 4,900. I think those Syracuse guys could probably have used one more bump. But anybody else, the floor is open at this point. Who else do you like for pass catchers?
We did mention Oklahoma State, but my favorite pass catcher I'm going to talk about on Oklahoma State when we get to the Fantastic Four. The only other guy that's interested, if you are looking for salary relief, Jace Brown, the wide receiver of the Wildcats. We had mentioned, and I hinted about Avery Johnson. If you are going to pivot off of that Wildcats running game, Jace Brown with Avery Johnson is a real nice pivot this week. Brown's their number one receiver. I've watched enough of the Wildcats over the last couple of years, and they're playing Tulane this week. Jace Brown is a nice little receiver, and he could get you a long home run with Avery Johnson. So I like him as he's 4,800. I like him as a nice little pivot also.
All right. I think that covers most of the options here at wide receiver, at least unless you're just looking for a total dart throw. But I don't see a whole lot in the 3Ks that we have for any sort of extreme target share. Not a glaring misprice down in the 3Ks anyway. We do have Golf Nut asking in our Discord chat if Gadsden is viable even in GPPs. And I think this is something that Head Chopper likes to say too, and he's on the midweek show, that we've seen so many times in college football. The misprices are popular because, I mean, for a reason, right? The chalk tends to hit more often than it doesn't hit in college football. So I'm inclined to play the guys that we know are priced, incorrectly, and then differentiate your lineup in another spot with a different high-end spend or somebody that's not quite as popular. So I have no issues playing Gadsden, even in GPPs.
I agree with you.
All right, let's go ahead and recap the DraftKings slate here with John's Fantastic Four picks to build around today on DraftKings, and then we'll switch over. We'll talk a little bit of FanDuel before we get out of here. So, John, who you got for a Fantastic Four today?
So if you want to build multiple lineups, you can go to our optimizer right on Roto Grinders and type in my Fantastic Four, and they'll give you GPP lineups and cash game lineups and a quarterback. I love Tylen Green of Arkansas. He does have a decent ownership, not as high as I thought, but I love him. The dual threat is a transfer from Boise State. Last week, he went nuts against Arkansas. I think it's Arkansas Pine Bluff. He scored 37.9 DraftKings points. I love him in this matchup. We have a 60% over under of over 60 against Oklahoma State. Now, if you've watched him at Boise State, he has a wide range of outcomes. There is a floor there because he's not a great passer, but incredible runner. He's only 7.5K. So put him in he's my DraftKings Fantastic Four quarterback. We talked about him, DJ Giddens. In cash games, I love him. You could probably even stack him with Avery Johnson in a cash game lineup. I would not do it in a GPP. I would differentiate there. But in cash games, I love DJ Giddens. I think he's the goal line back. He's a pass catching back. He's got great upside. I love him in cash games. Then we just mentioned him. Oronde Gadsden is still underpriced at 5K. He's essentially a big wide receiver playing tight end, right? We love the matchup this week against Georgia Tech. I think if the game script, if they're playing from behind, Gadsden's the guy I like. I love him. And in cash games, I like Deshaun Striblin, wide receiver, Oklahoma State. I believe he had 7 targets last week. He was on the field for 66 snaps. He had 8 targets. He didn't score a touchdown, and we know those are fickle, right, Justin? So if he gets in the end zone this week, he probably has over 20 points. So my fantastic four right now for DK is Taylor Green at quarterback, DJ Giddens at running back, Arande Gadsden at wide receiver, and Deshaun Striblin at wide receiver. And you can still make a lineup with Ollie Gordon if you want, because I gave you some price variance there. You can find value elsewhere.
All right, love it. Think those are good calls today for sure. And check out those fantastic four picks and a whole lot more in our lineup HQ. And it's a great time if you're interested in signing up for RG Premium with NFL starting obviously the other day. You can get your first month of NFL Premium for $15 off. Get yourself a 6-month combo subscription at an exclusive price of $469.99. It's a savings of $250 over buying 6 individual months of combo premium. If you're not a fan of the longer term commitment, you can get a month for just $120. And if you want a test run before you buy, you can dip your toes in the water with a 3-day pass at $19.99. Check the links in the description for more info on that. All right, let's pivot over to FanDuel here. Talk a little FanDuel before we get out of here. FanDuel has a few of the later night games on the slate, highlighted by Colorado, Nebraska should be a fun one tonight. Tennessee and NC State, probably one of the higher projected total games of the day. We've got Alabama against USF on the night slate as well. And Alabama will probably win that game comfortably, but I don't think USF is a super pushover. At least they've got some options at their prices on FanDuel that you can maybe consider. So at quarterback, that gives us extra options on FanDuel, the likes of course, Jalen Milroe, Will Howard, Shedeur Sanders, Iamaleava, the Tennessee quarterback, is available on FanDuel. So anybody that you would add to your priority quarterback pool on FanDuel.
I love this slate. I think it's very fascinating. I'm glad we get to break it down. I love Cameron Rising. And really, it's because on this slate, Jalen Milroe is 12.8. And I tried really hard to get Milroe and Ollie Gordon onto a lineup. Justin, it is really hard. So you can go Milroe and bypass Gordon, but I'd rather have Gordon and Cameron Rising. 10.7. That's a big savings. I just really like Rising on this one. I think the savings is significant enough, and I can make a decent lineup with Rising and Gordon. So I'm going to go Cameron Rising. And what do we have on the projected ownership? Oh, I don't have it on the I have to move my screen a little bit.
I'll get it. I got it up. So let's see. Rising, we have at 12%. Milroe at 30 right now.
So I do like that pivot because Rising could throw 4 touchdowns, total 4, maybe 1 rushing, 3 passing. So I like Rising a ton.
Yeah, Taylor Green on the FanDuel slate as well. He's a little bit cheaper than those other guys. So I kind of have a similar quarterback pool on FanDuel, sprinkling in maybe some of those other guys as well, but otherwise pretty similar to DraftKings. The running back position, there is not a whole lot I like in these extra games. It's mainly wide receivers where we're getting some extra guys. I mean, you still got Ollie Gordon on FanDuel. You still got Jamal Haynes on FanDuel. I mean, you have Devin Neal on the FanDuel slate as well, but he's over 10K. That's pretty expensive. Raheem Sanders, who we mentioned earlier on DK, I like on FanDuel at 6,500 as well. So otherwise, I don't have a whole lot of guys that are ads. Unless you want to touch Ohio State, like if you want to touch Judkins or Henderson, but they have a pretty easy matchup, and they're probably going to split touches down the middle. They're expensive. I just don't see a reason to do it. So I don't have a whole lot of running backs on FanDuel that I don't already have on DraftKings also.
I have one who I like a lot, and I highlighted him if you go. It is Dylan Sampson of Tennessee. My friends, he has turned into one of the best backs. He's moving up draft rankings. He's over 200 pounds. He had 3 touchdowns rushing. He had over 100 carries or 100 yards rushing last week. And in general, Josh Heupel has rotated those running backs. But this year, Sampson, to me, is by far, if you look at the depth chart of the Volunteers, they have a freshman who they really like, but they're not. I don't think he's going to be, as we move forward, really influential. I love Sampson. He's only 8.5. I think he's in a really nice spot if you want to pivot. And we have pretty nice look at right now. We have less than 5% ownership, Justin. I like Sampson a lot this week.
Yeah, definitely a fine play. I like that game. I think you
me
can stack
too.
up that game a little bit. If we're looking at wide receivers that are on the FanDuel slate as well, Kevin Concepcion for NC State had 3 touchdowns, I believe, last week. One of the better receivers in college football that doesn't get as much national attention, obviously, compared to some of the other guys. We all know the Ohio State guys. We all know Travis Hunter. Made the big catch that went on the highlight reels last week. So. And don't get me wrong, I like Colorado. I actually bet Colorado today.
Ooh.
Plus the 7 points. It's maybe I'll get a nice win like I did with Syracuse with Quinn Allen last week. But Colorado tends to be a pretty public team, so it surprised me to see them getting a full touchdown with their offensive weapons at Nebraska, who's starting a true freshman quarterback. So. We'll see. I'll go with the offensive experience there with Colorado, but that doesn't mean you have to play like Travis Hunter at 10-7 on FanDuel. The Ohio State guys, we've all seen that the talent is certainly there for Jeremiah Smith. I just mentioned I like Concepcion. I think those guys are my spends. Brazel for Tennessee as the Tennessee wide receivers, and this is noteworthy if you're playing on the DraftKings night slate. If you're playing on the DraftKings night slate, I think Brew McCoy is like $3,800. And they are going to spread the ball around. They got Squirrel White too and Brazel. So there's nobody a lock here, but Brazel at 5,400 on FanDuel, that's really cheap. And may help the rest of your lineup work. So what else do you like at wide receiver on FanDuel?
Well, I couldn't agree with you more than with Brazel. I mean, if you're really looking for that's almost like just a cheat code. It's such a good deal, right? And then one other cheat code, real cheap. Luke Haas. And why can't I find his salary? I'm looking quick. HASC. He is why all of a sudden. There he is. 5.9 of Arkansas. If you want to go with Taylon Green, if you want to stack that. Luke Haas was injured last year. I think he got hurt in the second game of the year or something. He only had 3 catches last week on 3 targets, but I expect this game to be much closer. He's probably the best Razorbacks pass catcher. He could give you some salary relief also. Just looking for some cheap options on FanDuel if you want to pay up for those quarterbacks and possibly Ollie Gordon. And, I think Traber Pena is a little expensive. I don't like above the 8 there. Gadsden's still, now he's a little more high priced, right? 7.3. I think FanDuel did a little bit better job of pricing him compared to DraftKings. So he's an interesting player there. And Keithy, again, I mentioned him. If you want Cameron Rising, Keithy's 7K here. I think he's very interesting.
Yeah, I like him a lot today. I tagged him as well. And on this note here, Carolina guy has asked earlier, what is our favorite quarterback wide receiver stack on FanDuel for GPPs? What do you like there?
So I'm going to go to lesser ownership. I think if you really want Nico Imalileva, and you could take him with any one of those. Who was you said Brew McCoy was the cheapest, right? I'd probably stay away from Brew McCoy.
Brew McCoy is cheap on DraftKings.
Yeah,
it's Brazel that's cheap on FanDuel.
Oh, then I like Brazel on FanDuel because I think he had 3 catches for 105 yards and a touchdown. Like he had a highly efficient day. I kind of like Nico Imalileva and Brazil then on the Tennessee passing game.
Yeah, I like that call in GPPs on FanDuel as well. All right. Think we have caught up. So NBA DFS also in the Discord chat has FanDuel cash. Let me go back to FanDuel on my screen here. I don't have the pricing quite as memorized on FanDuel. So he's got 7,400 left for wide receiver. He already has Gadsden. Malachi Fields is probably the cash game option that most people would consider there. John and I both like Keithy, the tight end for Utah, as it'd probably be more of a GPP play there. But if you have he said, if you only have 7,400 and that's what you want to stick with, I think Fields is fine. Going down to 6,600 and getting Stribling, or 6,300 and getting Owens is also fine if that salary savings helps you move up somewhere else. Otherwise, I think Fields is okay.
I agree. I like Fields a lot because he's got big ceiling. He could get you the 2 touchdown game. I agree with you completely on Fields.
All right, with that, I think we're caught up on everything. TJ says, looks like Jordan Love's ACL is intact based on preliminary reports, so the Packers fans can maybe breathe a sigh of relief this morning. We'll see how that news develops. But, of course, big Sunday of NFL football coming up tomorrow. We'll be back early in the morning with our Sunday morning NFL block here on the YouTube channel, so be sure to check us out. We'll be back next week, next Saturday. Again, I will be out next Saturday, but I believe Jordan will be in hanging out with John and talking some college football. Same time, same place. So thanks to TJ, as always, for producing for us. Thanks to John for joining me. And I am Justin. Enjoy College Football Saturday, everybody, and we will talk to you all later. See ya.